Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, John Feldt with Blue Water Outlook joins us to talk planting weather in the coming weeks. Will there be an upcoming drought this year? Peter Zeihan has a great webinar discussing his insights on what world events mean for U.S. agriculture. A link to watch it is in the description.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have our regulars. We have Turk and Ben, but we have a special guest. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Ben and let him introduce him.
Yeah, today we have John Feldt with Blue Water Outlook. He is our Mershman Seeds personal meteorologist. So that's pretty cool that we have the ability to share John's experience with our farmers. And I kind of highlighted with John a couple different things I wanted him to talk about, because I think in the next 2 weeks here, the next 2 weeks to a month, weather is going to be the main thing on farmers' mind on how soon they can get into the field. So without further ado, John, thank you for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about what the weather is going to do here.
Okay, so I think you should be able to see my screen here. And I just wanted to say, I spent most of my career in the Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis. I'm in St. Louis now, but I spent quite a bit of time in the Atlanta area. So when I moved back up here a number of years ago, I always get frustrated in March because I'm always thinking we're past winter and we're ready for spring. It's going to warm up, and I'm always disappointed in March, it seems like. And I could have a whole presentation on the meteorological reasons why. But we certainly have some interesting climate connection to this cold late winter. And if you've been following my content, I talk about that a lot. Now, I'd like to start off first by discussing the past winter. And a lot of the graphics you see are things that I present in my content for Mershman Seeds. And this is the accumulated winter season severity index. And unfortunately, we got some missing data here. But overall, it shows red means we've had a very mild winter. So the Western Corn Belt and parts of the Eastern Corn Belt, it was quite mild. The areas we had a harsh winter was generally the upper Midwest, and it has been very harsh in that area. We also had some areas, and I suspect this extends up to into around southeast Iowa and into parts of Illinois, this blue, and that was more severe because we had some localized heavy snow in that area. But most of the area had either a moderate or a mild winter in most of the Corn Belt. So one of the things I look at is where has spring started? And what I look at here is I look at the starting of the green up. And what we have here is anything shaded here is where the initial leaves have started to come out. And where it's blue, it means that it's been later than normal, and red is faster than normal. So the spring started out actually sort of delayed. You can see all this blue down here, but more recently it's really accelerated. I know in my backyard, I see some signs of spring, some initial leaf starting to come out, and actually some of the dogwoods I'm seeing beginning to bloom. And that's because we had, over the last couple of weeks, we had this warmer than normal weather here. That's yellow and orange. But soils are still cold. In the 40s, so we have a long way to go. We need some of that warm weather. So I guess some of the things we're looking at is soil temperature acceleration as far as warm up, and also for early field work that the fields aren't too wet. Now, one of the things that I look at is the drought monitor, and a couple things. I like to look at early spring with a little bit surplus of soil moisture, and you'll probably hear me talk about this in just a couple minutes, and that's because later in the summer, if it's really hot, we got to build up a little surplus. Well, right now, we're running on the dry side here in this areas in yellow and especially in areas of brown, but nothing across the western U.S. This is a long-term drought, and this is very serious. And I'm not a meteorologist that overplays things. And this comes into the Western Corn Belt, Nebraska, Kansas, and it is very serious. And I'll show you some things in just a minute here that show this summer, this growing season could be very, very rough for the Western Corn Belt, and it could approach into the central as well. Now, one of the things that I present in my weekly briefings is this North American regime, and it just sort of tells us our overall pattern. And you can see through early April here, and this is the next 2 weeks, we're in this Arctic high type of pattern, and that shows this really warm weather over the Arctic region, and unfortunately some cooler weather over our area. So the next 2 weeks with this Arctic high type pattern, I think we're vulnerable to generally below normal temperature. So we're not going to have much acceleration of spring probably for the next couple of weeks. Now we'll have some days in there that'll be warm, but we're going to have also more likely cooler than normal temperatures, and this will take us right through the first week of April. Matter of fact, this weekend here in St. Louis, I just saw we're going to have temperatures in the upper 20s again, so definitely another taste of winter. Now, as far as rainfall goes the next couple of weeks, I wanted to show you here, green is above normal. And one of the things that I've talked about, it seems like forever now, because we're in the second dip of La Nina, is the areas that tend to get more rain during a La Nina, and that is the areas of sort of the eastern Corn Belt and parts of the central Corn Belt. Now, talking about La Nina, this is the plot that I look at, one of them, that show the probabilities of La Nina as we go forward. And models have been really consistent in pulling us out of this La Nina, but it's been slow. The temperatures are still -1 Celsius, and that's still borderline a moderate La Nina in the equatorial Pacific. But models show it coming down through the May, June, and July, but it's going to last through the spring now, maybe even into the summer. So what does that mean? Well, these are what we usually get. So it means that we could get some cool weather in our area, and also, especially from our area off into the eastern Corn Belt, wet areas. So Illinois, maybe southeast Missouri, over into Indiana, that's the area that could be unusually wet. Now, I looked at some models here because we're sort of focusing in on April here, and this is the early part of April, and you can see that area of cool air sort of lingers around into the first or second week of April, but by the end of April, we get above normal. That's the brown shade. So I think that's sort of my theme here, is that we're going to start out, we're going to end March into early April into this pattern that's going to bring us some cooler than normal weather. It's going to be a little bit stubborn getting into our spring feel. But then as we get into mid to late April, I think we're going to have a fairly abrupt shift into above normal, and it's really going to accelerate. Now, this is that pattern for precipitation. Very big gradient here from dry conditions over the upper Midwest and Great Lakes to wet conditions. That's the green down in this area here. So that's where I said parts of central and southern Illinois, southeast Missouri could be wetter than, say, northeast Iowa and southern Wisconsin. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at the entire spring season. And what I'm looking at is La Nina patterns switching over to what we've seen with climate trends. And what does that mean? Well, after this cool start, a quick transition to warmer weather. And you can sort of see that here in the seasonal outlook, April, May, and June, above normal temperatures. And look at this dry area here. Look how dry this is right in here. And that is my concern. This is the drought monitor. This is where drought is expected to persist. So I think we're really looking at very sort of scary dry, especially western Nebraska, good parts of or western South Dakota, good parts of Nebraska, most of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, really looks dry. Now, closer to home here, there could be some improvement, and that's at La Nina. But I think if we get into that hot and dry, that's later in the summer. So we got a little bit of leeway, but the western U.S., look how much of the U.S., this is really a historic type drought. So it is sort of scary here. Now, so let's look at summer here. And I wanted to show you here, this is another type of model I worked. This is May, June, and July. And look at this, the whole nation just about above normal temperatures. And I don't think I've ever seen this much dryness. And, sometimes it's like I look at that and I say, hey, let's look at a couple, the next model run or the next model. This is showing across almost all the models I look at, climate models, and it's also been for months and months. And that gives me a greater confidence. So it is showing, for example, take a look at this area right here, the southwest U.S. I know that's not in our growing area, but look at this, above normal and very, very dry. So that is a little bit worrisome that we get those conditions. Okay, so let's talk about spring flooding. Let's shift over here a little bit. Well, all winter long, there has hardly been any snowpack here over the Missouri River Basin. So I think right away you can say the Missouri River Basin, between the drought and the snow, is that we're going to have a minimal chance for significant flooding on the Missouri. And of course, the Missouri comes in here and comes in here into the middle Mississippi. So with that reduced flow, that's going to sort of reduce the flow down here into southeast Missouri. Likewise, we've melted a lot of the snow. There's still a lot in the upper Midwest, but we've melted a lot and it's localized. So I still think it looks like sort of just normal flows here. So where could we get the more significant flooding? And I don't think it's all that high a chance, but look at the blue dots. This is where we have tributaries running high. So I think a small part of the lower Ohio into the middle Mississippi, and maybe let's see if I can draw it here. Maybe like in this region right in here, that might be where we get some high flows, but I don't see it necessarily being, extremely high. You can see up in Iowa here, Burlington, how it's expected to remain well below flood stage. And one of the things, this is sort of not the easiest to interpret plot here, but blue is basically historically the probabilities for different flows. So if you look at red and purple, those are our really high flows when it gets into fields and such. So this is historically the probability. So it's only a 10% probability of getting up here. This is the current run, and that's below the blue. So that's saying that the chances of that type of flooding that's going to cause all sorts of disruptions is less this year than average. So I think overall the outlook is near normal, but I'm actually thinking the upper Mississippi is probably below normal in that area. So let me bring this in summary before I end here, just because I know I tend to show a lot of stuff, but let's pull it back into, in a summary here. Looks like we're going to go into a cool phase over the next couple of weeks from late March into early April. There will be some wet spots, especially central southern Illinois, southeast Missouri, and that's where we could get some delays getting into the field because of wet fields. But I do expect this abrupt shift to above normal temperatures by mid or late April and into May. That's going to allow us to catch up. So, we might be sitting back here and being a little bit frustrated, but I think we're going to catch up as we get into that time frame. And above normal temperatures continuing through the growing season. Soil moisture is generally adequate right now, although we had these dry areas and spots, but I think we're prone towards talking a lot more about dry weather as we go through the growing season, but much more serious concerns further west. Now, one last thing here I just wanted to point out. If you'd like to get our weather content, go to mershmanseedsweather.com and sign up. You can always unsubscribe. I think you'll like it. We have a great number of people on there now, and hardly anybody unsubscribes. And I always offer Joe and others and anybody who's on my list here, if you ever have a real specific issue or question, you can always email me, John, John, at bluewateroutlook.com, and I will answer your question, because I know I talk about a very big area, but I can actually get down to your farm if you have a really high decision, to make a big decision on something to do. Just email me. I'd be glad to answer. So with that, I'm going to pass it back, and that's your summary.
You have any questions, Joe?
No, I don't have any questions. Thanks, John. I know one of your former jobs, you had told me that you were a hydrologist, and so river flows that's one of your natural talents. And we found you to be very, very accurate in your predictions of how high water is going to get on some of these rivers. So.
And that's something that I talk about in my content. I'll talk about floods as well. You're right. I was the meteorologist in charge of the Des Moines, Iowa office for a while, so I'm used to weather in the Midwest. I was a hydrologist in charge of the Southeast River Forecast Center, and that's the folks that predict the river levels. So I jump back and forth quite a bit, and that's why soil moisture and things like that, I look at very closely.
Well, we appreciate you coming on today, and we'll bring you back as customers would like to hear more from you, particularly when we get into the summer season. And then also, make sure everyone signs up for John's predictions. You can get a daily one, plus you can get the weekend recap. And I really like your weekend one, which is kind of just like what you just went through, where you kind of tell what happened, what's going on, and what's going to happen. And we run our business by it. We literally do, because we found it to be very beneficial.
Great. Good to hear, Joe.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Okay, thanks, John.
Well, as always, John always has good information, and so we got a couple more weeks before we're going to hit it hard, sounds like.
Yeah, sounds like we're going to have plenty of moisture rebuilding, especially to our south and to our east, so that'll keep guys at bay for a little while. What I had to add for just a short touch on this is he talked about it for about maybe 45 seconds there on what soil temperatures are. We actually did, in the state of Iowa, we did see soil temperatures as of Wednesday reach 50, 52 degrees. Here in southeast Iowa, we had some nice 70, 75 plus degree days, but those soil temperatures are quickly receding. So Wednesday we had highs out of the entire state at 52. By Thursday, we are at 44, and we are down to 40 for what Friday's soil temps looked like. So, and they're only going to probably continue to drop as we have some lows in the upper 20s. So this is going to be one of those things where this is our last chance to get things prepped, to make sure we have all of our chemical in place, to have all of our starter in place, make sure the seed's in place, go back over your plans for what things look like for this coming year. Talk to your retailers about making sure all the supplies that they have is in place, because it sounds like with what John says, we got about 2 weeks here before go time, 2 to 3 weeks before go time anyway.
I would agree. So it's still early, and remember, you got a long window to plant that crop. You don't have to do it all in 2 days, so.
March came in like a lamb. It sounds like it's going to go out like a lion.
Yep. Some of the other things, I guess the last thing before I turn it over to Turk is, go back and watch, if you guys haven't had the chance to go back and watch, we had 3 or 4 really strong episodes with some awesome content. We had Caleb Moore on with Precision Plant, looking at different options that we can have on our planters. We had Amy Niver on talking about the different in-furrow options that are out there, some things to be thinking about, further, if there's any last minute changes that guys want to make, or even to be thinking about for next year already. Those are a couple really good episodes. If you didn't get a chance to look at those are episodes that I would go back and watch, because there's good content.
I agree with you, Ben. Right now, if you're a farmer, you should be planning for 23, particularly if you're going to add some equipment onto your planter. And it looks like to me that with fertilizer prices, banding your phosphate's going to be a big advantage, and then also potentially putting insecticides and fungicides, in the furrow or next to the seed is probably something you should be looking at.
That Xyway is something that they really want it, not directly on the seed, but slightly off somehow, and I think that as we continue to move forward, we're going to get more and more information about how those products are working and actually are very effective. So.
Yeah, and equipment side, sounds like you got to order now to have it in time to get it on for next spring.
Yep, that's pretty much what we're hearing, that if you don't have it, you're not going to get it for this year. So you gotta get it ordered and start planning for next year.
Sounds good. Turk, what do you got for us today?
I just want to again remind everybody that if you have old crop in your bin, you need to be considering getting it moved. It appears that the old crop is, the spread between old crop and new crop is narrowing dramatically. Old crop has a lot of resistance, and new crop continues to build as we look at the dry weather, as we look at the world supply. I think I can't overstate enough that, and we've said this a while back, get your bins cleaned out. I think that was sound advice. I think it's still sound advice. The market has already figured in the premium, if you will, for this old crop. I think the focus is going to be on new crop moving forward. I still think there's opportunities yet to come in the new crop, but it's not too early to start pricing some of that, and you'll never go broke taking a profit on a portion of that crop.
I agree, Turk. Anything else?
No, again, if we look at South America continues to have some problems. The corn crop down there is pretty much in the marketplace, so I don't think there's going to be any market movers down there, and it appears that there's a dry pattern continuing to set up for another basically double non-La Nina year, and so that's the only thing to watch down there that could be a market mover.
Well, for me this week, there's two things that I came across that are really important. One of them was Peter Zeihan did a webinar for Farm Credit, and Farm Credit has made that available basically for public viewing. So we're going to share that link because it says we can share it with our organization. We consider our customers part of our organization, obviously. And so it's a 1-hour webinar, and I'm telling you, if you can carve out at least 1 hour to watch this. Peter Zeihan is a geopolitical strategist, and I've seen him in person and follow him real closely, but he's going to give you a really good basic understanding of the Ukraine-Russian war and what the impact is going to be on your operation from the ag spec. He's going to talk about fertilizer. He's going to talk about grain exports and the whole bit. So you'll get a pretty good understanding. Of course, this is pretty fluid. It's changing all the time, but this was put on this week, so it's pretty new. We'll put that link. Be sure to watch it because if some of his predictions come true, it is downright scary. But fortunately, I can tell you from the United States perspective, we are in a great position to take advantage of the opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunities to discuss, so be sure to watch that. And then the other thing I ran across was a University of Illinois professor is working with the water hemp plant to potentially make the male sterile. Because if you're not familiar with the water hemp plant, it has female plants and male plants. Well, if the female plants produce males that are sterile, there will be no future of that particular species. So it's going to be done through biotechnology. They're working on it. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of time involved to do this, mainly because you got to make sure that when you mess with nature, there's not some insect or something that is beneficial from the water hemp. From our perspective, the water hemp's not too beneficial, but something in nature must depend upon it. So, and then obviously it's a GMO, so it's going to be 10 years in the future. But at least maybe we can rid our soybean fields and cornfields from this terrible pest. So that's what I ran across. So
I do have one more thing, Joe,
sure.
on the markets. Next week we have a supply and demand report coming out, and we had a planting intentions report come out. And those are going to be big reports and potentially market movers. So if you want to get something done prior to that, get it done before next Thursday.
Okay, that's good advice. So anyhow, lots of stuff. If you get a rainy day, this week I definitely watched the Peter Zeihan webinar from Farm Credit. We thank the folks at Farm Credit for making that available. So that brings us to the corny joke. Now, again, we always try to give you heads up for what's coming, right? April Fool's is next week, okay? So you got to be on your guard on April Fool's Day. So I thought I would tell a couple April Fool's jokes, to get you ready for it, okay? Do you know that babies born on March 31st are the easiest to prank on April Fool's Day? Do you know that?
Didn't know that.
Yep, that's because they were literally born yesterday.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now here's another good advice for April Fool's Day. Believe nothing and trust no one this April Fool's Day. So it's just like any other day. Very true advice anymore. Well, anyhow, thanks for watching today. We sincerely appreciate your business. We hope that you and your family are healthy and safe, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe.